Right, thanks, Nikki. So I can see we've got people joining us now, haven't we? So welcome, everyone. Really good to have you with us. Nikki, I think we just said we'd give people just a couple of minutes to join. Can you see people still coming in? Should I just pause for a little while longer?
They are joining, but perhaps you could start by introducing everyone in the meantime.
Great. Okay. Well, that's what we'll do. We'll make a start, and hopefully anyone else who's going to join us will be with us very shortly. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this sort of briefing conversation. Thanks very much for being with us. My name's Claire Stoneham. I'm the Director of Strategy and Major Projects here at CUH. I've got a very esteemed panel with me today, who I will just ask all to say hello very briefly so you know who we've got. And I'm just going to go round my screen. So Janice.
Hello, my name is Janice Powell and I head up Phase 1 projects.
Working in major projects, that's right. Thank you, Janice. Pip.
Hi everyone, I'm Pip Sparks. I'm the Divisional Head of Workforce looking after Pathology Directorate.
Great, thank you, Pip. Hello, Hugo.
Hi, Hugo Ford. I'm an oncologist and I'm the Divisional Director for Division B.
Thank you, Hugo. Karin.
Good morning. I'm Karin Charlton. I'm the Director of Capital Estates and Facilities.
Super. Nikki, you've said hello, but do you want to just say hello, introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nikki Barnard. I'm just assisting with the webinar today. I'm from Comms.
Super, thank you. Colin.
Colin Carr, I'm interim lead manager in histopathology. I think all of you know me on the call.
Thanks, Colin. And last but not least, David.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Werrett. I'm the Workforce Director and a member of the board alongside Claire. Delighted to be here today.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. So, look, I think well, so the first thing I should say is I'm really sorry that we rearranged this from before Christmas. I'm afraid that was my fault. I came down with COVID, but I'm really glad that we were able to put it back in soon in the new year. I think the purpose of this session today, as I've understood it, is that we know there are a number of concerns within the histopathology service. We know there are issues with the building, and we know there are issues about the future. We've had the opportunity to see some of your questions that you've submitted in as part of this process. And what we're going to do today is try and talk a little bit about some of the work that we know is underway. Try and, I hope, show that we understand some of the issues and that we are working to address them. But I think it's important to say at the outset that, so we know that we do really know there are some issues there. This is very much an initial conversation. I don't see this as a sort of one-off event and then we disappear again. I think we're really keen to make sure that we've got an ongoing dialogue and that we've got the opportunity to work on some of these issues together over the next period of time. And that's certainly the way that I'm approaching it. Hugo, just to kind of kick us off, so I've certainly heard in the work that I've been doing recently on histopathology, this sense that perhaps it's not valued as a service within the trust, that perhaps it's a bit hidden and we don't really appreciate it. So can you talk to us about sort of your sense of that and how it's viewed within the hospital?
Well, I'll just put a couple of perspectives on that. Obviously, from my own personal perspective as an oncologist, it's an absolutely critical service and everyone will be aware of that. But I think you're right, Claire. So I think there's been some justification for the view that because it's a service that actually isn't a frontline service and it doesn't appear in any sort of the board reports and so on that people see, that to some extent it's been a bit under the radar, and therefore, and it's a huge service, which I think people maybe haven't appreciated. It's been a bit under the radar, and therefore hasn't received some of the attention that some of the other frontline services have done. I think to be fair, I think Rebecca and the current management team have done an awful lot in terms of raising the profile. The estates issues which Karen are going to talk about, have absolutely come to a head, and I think what we've been doing is working very hard to make sure that certainly the executive members of the board and ultimately the board as a whole are really sized on the importance of the service and how critical it is not just to delivery of our clinical services, but also to a number of our regional partners, and of course for our research mission as well. So I think it would be right to say it probably has been a bit under the radar. I think it would probably be also right to say that it's flying much nearer the top of people's lists now than it was a few months ago.
Yeah, thanks, Hugo, and certainly it's very high up my list of things that I'm thinking about at the moment. I was lucky enough to come and have a tour of the service last year, which was hugely useful for me in terms of just understanding a bit more about what you do. Karen, I think I was going to come to, and sorry, we are going to move through this hopefully sort of in a reasonably pacey way, just because I think we've got quite a lot to talk about. But again, you'll give us feedback on whether this is working for you. Karen, talk to us just a little bit then about the kind of the history of the service being in the LMB and sort of how we've got to where we've got to. But I think you'll also put it within the context of our broader plans for developing the estate. We know that the whole of the hospital estate actually is in quite poor condition, and we've been working on a sort of Addenbrooke's 3 plan for how we would address that. So talk to us a little bit more about that, if you would.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Yes, in 2018, there had been issues within histopathology around accreditation, and there was a real urgency in getting work completed in order to retain the services accreditation. And when I landed back at the trust in January 2018, it was clear that this move was on its way. And in February 2018, we took a bit of a pause and just reviewed the options for the LMB, because investing 5 million, which has actually ended up being near £6 million into a building that was one of the first buildings on the hospital site back in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, for what was a relatively short period of time, felt to be quite a challenge. And we looked at 2 options at that time. We looked at proceeding with that now £6 million investment, or a modular build, a standalone modular build on the site of around 24 million. And what management executive concluded at that point is that the urgency is such that we needed to proceed with the LMB option, knowing full well that that was only a shortish term solution, and that was a modest investment into a building of its age. And you'll remember that the LMB has actually moved into the new accommodation in the first new building on the biomedical campus. So we knew that a longer term solution needed to be had, but that's not straightforward or easy, and that is set against the backdrop of the rest of the challenge we have on the estate. To just put that into context, we have about £103 million backlog burden. So this is all deferred maintenance, getting the condition functional grade, statutory compliance up to condition B. And if you just think about not histopathology, the LMB block, because that's a university building, but for the CUH owned stock, 70% of the estate is in poor condition, and 5% on top of that is in really bad condition. So we have only about 20% in satisfactory condition. So that tells us how big our challenge is. And when we look at a functional suitability, 28% of that of the estate is in really bad shape, unacceptable really for its condition, for its function, and 41% is in poor condition. So it's not satisfactory. So really a large proportion. So 69% of our estate being in poor or worse functional condition. And from a space utilization perspective, 85% of our estate is used fully, 14%, especially the older part of the hospital and A&E is overutilized. So finding a solution for histopathology in amongst all of those challenges isn't easy or straightforward. We haven't got space set aside where we could repurpose for a histopathology block. So we have been looking at what the longer term options are, and you'll remember back in, I think, the autumn of 2018 or 19, I can't quite remember, the announcement of some monies for replacement Addenbrooke. So that was fantastic, great news to my ears, knowing that we probably need around £2.5 billion to rebuild our hospital. We then, as an organisation, then looked and said, actually, what are the different time horizons we need to have a look at? What's the phasing strategy? And very much in that phase one, the 18 to 24 months is really two key services: the emergency department and also histopathology. Those are two key services that we said, we know that we are not going to get significant capital investment for an Addenbrooke 3 until 2030, 2035. So what do we need to do now? So we have been looking and making some modest improvement in the emergency department, and what we're doing at this moment, and Janet will talk a little bit more about that, is about the medium-term options for histopathology. And as we move through the phases, phase 4, so phase, in 2030, 2035, outpatients, pathology, and the diagnostic hub are a key part of our future development strategy.
Great.
And then I will just pause there to just say this is very much in our thinking. Finding a solution isn't straightforward, and then I'll come and talk a little bit later on some of the more immediate issues.
Great, thanks, Corinne. So yeah, I mean, as you say, on the trust as a whole, we've got our work cut out, haven't we, in terms of developing the estate? And I think you've said that histopathology is very much a key part of that, both in terms of the very immediate questions, but also in terms of the longer term plan. I wondered, could you talk a little bit more about the very immediate challenges with the building? I know when I was shown round, there were lots of sort of things pointed out to me as things that make it actually a really difficult place to work in at the moment. We know it's a real challenge for staff. Can you just talk a little bit about what you're doing with your team to see what we can do to address some of those?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is recognising at the point when we moved into the LMB is recognising, as I said earlier, the age and the quality of that building and the constraints within that building. So it makes the service a little bit more disjointed than if you started afresh. And so with that comes a number of challenges. So there's the fact that it is connected in to the university accommodation. So when the fire alarm goes off in the university side, the CUH side is affected, and vice versa. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the first buildings on the site. So from an energy efficiency perspective, it really wasn't built for meeting today's standards. And the wind whistling through the building is because of those windows. And I think what the team has been trying to do, where the windows have been broken, they have been replacing it. But the only long-term solution to that is replacing the windows. And that's going to be no mean feat. So there's no immediate plan in place to do that. And this forms part of our business case and our decision making around staying within the LMB as well. There are a number of things, I've reviewed all of the responses or all of the calls to the help desk. 104 calls since April last year, 226 since November 2019. And what I can see, some of the things that's really big issues is around the doors not opening, and so the ventilation interacting with the doors, interacting with the fume cupboards, etc. So I've asked the team to just have a look at what more can be done to rebalance the air handling units, and see, we might not fix it throughout because it might not stand up to that, but see what can be done and try and review that on a regular basis. I can see the team responds fairly quickly to blocked toilets and those type of things. I can see it seems to be a urinal that seems to be blocking up. I think the best we can do now is just keep responding very quickly and see if there's anything else that can be done. I can see some of the other things, such as, the air conditioning is blowing out really cold. We can see whether or not we can make some deflectors to just deflect the flow of the air, and a few other things. So our head of maintenance will will pick up with the team on that. And then from a capital team's perspective, they're also having a look at, so what are the things that can be done in the short term, but will probably cause some disruption. And then if we had more of a blue sky thinking within the LMB, what would be a cost to that? And the team is working with the operational service to just have a look at, is decanting possible at all? Really, what's the art of the possible? Because we have a challenge if we don't make the space of, even if we decide to do the work, if we don't have the space available to do the work, then the work can't be done. And if the work is impacting on the service, the pathology service, then we're in this constant position of not being able to move that forward. And things like dripping ceilings, I'll finish in a second. The things like dripping ceilings and stuff, my request would be, please just continue to report those things. We'll have a look to see, is there some recurring issues in recurring spaces that we could perhaps divert? We might not be able to stop something, but divert the issues. And having reviewed all of the jobs on the job system, I can see there are probably 2 or 3 that I can't see a satisfactory conclusion. And I can see that many of those things will probably continue to occur.
Thanks, Corinne. So I just wanted to check. I think you've just answered the question actually, but just from a purely practical perspective, if people are encountering things today, tomorrow, next week that are issues with the building, I think you're asking people to absolutely keep reporting those via the help desk. I think you're particularly asking the team to look at them and investigate how we could respond to that quickly. But just to confirm, that's the sort of ask for the team within the building.
Yes, and I can see that people are making well use of the help desk. So, but there can be a tendency that if something doesn't get fixed, that people stop reporting it. So I'm just saying, please keep reporting it. We might not be able to solve the underlying issue, but we can certainly try and get it back into operation. And see what more can be done to mitigate the issues. But I think really the issue is that building, you know, it's the reason why the university, why the MRC moved out of it. It is quite obvious of its age.
Yeah, okay, great. And thank you, that's very clear. I want to come on just to talk about then the work we've got underway to look at the options for the future. But just before I do that, Karen, I think we've had a specific question raised about the lease on the LMB, and I think we've picked up some anxiety that might mean there isn't a building for the service to operate from next April. I think you can offer some reassurance on that point.
Yeah, so the property team have been working with the university for some time, and one of the key issues is this new energy efficiency legislation. And that legislation says that landlords can't lease out premises unless the building meets a certain energy efficiency standard. And currently that building, being the age it is, doesn't meet that standard. So we are working with the university, and we are establishing what are the costs. And again, the team's working with the operational services. If we are to replace the windows and do other things to improve the energy efficiency, how might we practically do that? So my request is keep working with the capital team and see how best we can work to make that happen. We are also exploring the cost, because there's also exemptions under the legislation. So it maybe feel like, you know, if it was going to be done, it would have been done by now. But property agreements are usually quite, you know, takes longer than you think. But the teams, both from the university and from our team, are very much onto that. And I feel confident that we will get to a point where we will have a position on the energy efficiency. We'll know whether it's an exemption. And if we are not exempt, we will have a clear path forward with that. And then also, if we get to a point, which I don't foresee, but if we get to a point where the work isn't complete by April 2023, then we're going to have to just take a risk on it. But what we do know, and I absolutely know, is we're not going to stop the histopathology service, because then we may as well shut the whole hospital, because the service is so integral to what we do.
Exactly. That's the really important point, I think, isn't it? We know that it is so important and so critical that there is absolutely no way in which, you know, the service isn't continuing from next April. The reality is it's going to be in the LMB, and you and the team will find a way to make that happen. We also know that really isn't the right answer in the medium and longer term, and that's what we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, and if I can just add something, so the other option we are looking at is the purpose-built accommodation on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus in 1000 Discovery Drive, and that very much will provide the medium-term solution until our diagnostic hub is provided. So we are it feels like we're traipsing through treacle, but even if we, extending the lease to the LMB doesn't mean that histopathology will be within that building forevermore. This is the first thing we want to achieve. Extend it, gives us breathing space, and if we have a use for the space, then great. But Janice will outline now, actually there's a significant process behind actually getting us to the right solution ahead of the diagnostic hub, without every time just taking a tiny step forward and a tiny step forward, but actually a solution that is fit for purpose for the organization and the integral service that histopathology provides.
Great. That's a perfect introduction, Karen, then I think into Janice. So Janice, part of your role is kind of managing this histopathology major project. Can you just talk to us a little bit then about the work that we've got underway? You've been to ME, I think, management executive already, so just tell us a bit about that conversation and then how you would see this work developing over the next few months.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So just a little bit of background. I joined in May, heading up phase 1 projects, of which histopathology is one. I think one of the questions that I wanted to answer up front is, someone put, why are we just looking at this now? Well, we have been working on this. And I can say that the minute I joined, I started a weekly task and finish group with a collaboration across estates, operational staff and finance. And at that weekly group that we've been working and had a number of workshops and weekly updates. And between May to September, we've worked on a preferred way forward. That the weekly task group also reports into the histopathology delivery board that is chaired by Claire, which in itself reports into this phase 1 strategic delivery board chaired by our chief executive Roland, who I know has already himself had a site visit, because we are talking constantly about histopathology and the importance that the staff are held in a safe environment and building that they can work in. So part of the report that went to ME in September was a recommendation that we must stay on site. The nature of histopathology, the fact that it depends very much on logistics with blocks and slides, the importance of the service that everyone, Karen, Hugo and Claire have said. But more importantly, we looked at a number of opportunities to move off-site and stay on-site. And there were about 5 options, I believe. And a paper went to ME in September saying, A, that we must stay on-site, and that they endorsed us fully costing 1000 Discovery Drive and LMB. So where we are at the minute is that we're working up detailed business case to look at the costing. Everyone knows the pressures in the NHS and funding is really important to understand what the cost pressure would be. But part of that story and working up a strategic case is to highlight the importance of histopathology, the benefits and opportunities it brings to diagnostic services on the campus. So we are looking at those 2 options. And then the next stage would be that by end of February, we would be putting forward our preferred option with some financials to look at what that cost pressure would be. And then based on that, and at the minute the preferred option is Discovery Drive, but we need to understand the costs of that. It's important, Karen saying that we would be extending the lease. Even if we were to go to Discovery Drive, it wouldn't be available when the current lease expires in March next year. So we will have to extend the lease in LMB. But the plan is then to have a full detailed financial case on that preferred option submitted by April 22. And that's a 5-case business case. They're quite meaty documents, but very, very important that we get the whole story about the strategic importance of histopathology and the future, and it all fits in with cancer and genomics, and we all would love a lab that was fit to invite our politicians to, and it supported the diagnostics on the campus. So those are the timescales that we're working for.
All right, lovely. Thank you, Jan. It's really clear then, I think, around the 2 options. And actually, this is a really important time, isn't it, over the next few months of really bringing that business case together and putting forward the Discovery Drive option. Colin, you sit on that delivery board as well. And I think alongside the business case work that Janice has talked about, you're also doing some particular thinking, I understand, about, kind of operational and sort of service improvement. And I think, some of the things that you're working on speak to some of the questions that we had in advance of this briefing. I'm really conscious of the time, but I do want to give you a chance to talk about it, and then I'm going to try and kind of rush through the rest of this. I'm sorry, we may run over by 5 minutes or so, but Colin, talk to us a little bit about the work that you're leading on thinking about how the service runs operationally.
Yeah, okay, I'll just start by saying, for those of you who don't know the staff group here that well, when I did my first couple of months and did a SWOT analysis, the strength of this department is its workforce and its staff. They are completely professional, skilled, committed individuals and work really well as a team. I'm not embarrassing people, but I feel blessed to have clinical leadership from Rebecca and Mike, because it's some of the strongest I've ever had in my 45-year career. And for the department, that really makes a big difference, having that clinical leadership. The division supports histopathology significantly. Both Hugo and Tracy have been great in supporting some of the things we've wanted to do around training, workforce, rebanding people and additional staff. So, there is a lot of support from the trust, and we've succeeded in getting funding as well. The bit I want to talk about very briefly is that staff involvement is really important if we're going to get any plan through that makes a good laboratory fit for the future. So what we're trying to do is trying to get a commercial external resource in with some expertise to help the staff develop those processes. And the processes around revisiting existing process mapping and revisiting baseline data. I know you don't like the SMART model, most of you, but it is about revisiting what we did in the SMART model and then taking that model and using it differently, involving the staff to develop a target operating model, which will involve workforce planning, technologies, process mapping, and functional design of any new building, so that it can inform Karen's team as to what they need to do to build us a lab fit for the future. And lots of you asked about all sorts of detailed questions. All I can assure you is that all of those will be taken into account. I'm hoping the trust will invest in this external resource. It's got through the first 2 or 3 hurdles. It's got 1 more to go, but it's fairly favourable, I think. And again, thanks to the division support from Hugo and Tracy, and thanks to finance support from Tim Stevens and Ed Smith. So I just want to reassure you that we are fighting very hard at top level for histopathology. There's a lot of recognition. The division recognises your input and is supporting you fully. The workforce team has been great. Both Pip and David have supported anything that we've wanted to do. even though sometimes I've had to bend the rules a little bit, as David and Pip will know well. But, you know, we've been allowed to get things going, and I'm really, really confident for the future. But I think my message to all the staff is that you are the experts, and you're the only people who are going to be able to design something that actually looks good, because we want to go to the architect and say, look, this is our design brief, this is the brief we've got, now come up with us a nice working environment that's nice and light, airy, environmentally clean and friendly. I'm not going to say anything more because there's a lot more to come yet, but the staff will be involved fully, and part of that, Claire, is passing those skills over from an external resource to the internal team so that we can do some of this work ourselves in future.
Great, really helpful, Colin, thank you. And I think you've put some of that brilliantly in terms of the skill and expertise and brilliance of the team. And I think you said, Colin, there'll be lots of opportunity for people to get involved in that work. I think that's right, but it's a kind of, we're not quite starting yet. Is that fair?
That is fair, because I need some money first and a little procurement exercise to do it, but that's my problem.
But it's coming down the line, and people should expect to see that in the next few months.
Has full divisional support as well.
Great. Really good, thank you. So I'm conscious that we've run a little bit over. Pip, I know Colin referred to just some of the work you've been doing to support the histopathology service. Was there anything that you wanted to add to what Colin had said?
No, I'm conscious of time. I think Colin put that really well. Obviously, we are doing everything we can within the division, within workforce, to support any initiatives. We are one key issue is to making sure that your team is well. Your vacancies are as low as they possibly can. So we are continuing to support Colin with that. And obviously we'll be involved in anything going forward.
Great, that's really good, Pip. Thank you. And David, I thought I might just come to you then, because you've listened to everything we've said over the course of the last half an hour, but I know you do lots of these sorts of briefing sessions and conversations with colleagues right across the trust. I guess I might just ask you kind of what stands out for you from the conversation we've had, and I mean, what would you say from the perspective of your role as workforce director to colleagues listening to this now?
Gosh, what would I say? I would say, bearing in mind we're over time, I would say in 1 minute, I was surprised about the environmental issues that staff are facing right now. And obviously half of this conversation has been very much about some basic stuff, heating, water, fire alarms, which we really need to acknowledge. And we need to acknowledge the challenges that the other members of the team who are trying to fix that face in Karen's team. So I'm hearing that loudly and clearly. But then I'm hearing and uncertainty about the future and where this estate issue takes us. But then alongside it is the importance of this team to the hospital. Histopathology, there's no hospital without histopathology. There is no service without the team to deliver it. And I suppose there is every possibility that those two things may become mixed up, i.e. we're not valued because we work in an estate which is not acceptable. And that's not the case. I think what we're all saying is this team is important and it works in an environment which is not acceptable. Both of those are absolutely true. I think the important thing is to find a way of keeping talking and doing the things that we can do to fix some of the issues, to lift some of the uncertainty. So your point at the beginning, this is the start of a conversation that we need to have on a regular basis. And I would suggest we absolutely plan a continued engagement process through this uncertain and challenging time.
Great, really good, excellent. Thank you, David. And so I'm conscious that we are over. We really are going to finish any minute now. Hugo, I just thought I'd come to you just right at the end for, is there anything you think that we haven't said that we should have said, anything that really stands out to you from the conversation that we've had?
Well, So I would say, look, referring back to what Karen said, basically, we're in this really difficult position with the trust where the whole of the hospital, or at least the whole of the hospital built before about 1990, which is the bulk of it, is in a really poor state, and poor Karen and her team, you know, are trying to work really hard to make sure that is you know, that is resolved as quickly as possible. But none of these things have got quick fixes, and you know, that's become increasingly apparent. You know, every time we lift a stone, there's more horrors underneath it, and that makes it really difficult for staff who have to work in these environments. You know, and I wish I could say, you know, tomorrow, you know, we're going to move out into a lovely lab building, it's going to be perfect. But you know, I can't. And I think it's just a recognition that, you know, we do all recognise that. Karen and her team are working really hard to find the best solution, working with the leadership team in pathology. But with the best one in the world, it's going to take a little while. And, you know, we acknowledge that is not ideal from the point of view of the staff working there. And that means people working, as David said, in conditions that are not, you know, what they would want or what we would want for you, what you would want, what we would want for you. But we are aware, we are doing our best, and we have a plan to get through it.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Hugo. I'm really conscious of the time, and I know we've overrun. So look, I'm going to, I will just wrap up now. Can I say a huge thank you to all of you colleagues who've joined me on the panel today. Really grateful for your time, your insight, and your contributions, and a huge thank you to everyone who's joined us as a participant and who has listened to the conversation. Thank you for making the time. Nikki, we've recorded this, haven't we? So we will make sure that it's made available to anyone who wasn't able to join us today. I'm not quite sure how, but we will get that out to you as soon as we can. And really, I think I just wanted to come back to that point, David, you've made it. I started here at the beginning. We really would welcome, I think, your feedback on this as a session. I hope it's been useful, but please do tell us what's worked. Perhaps if you think we haven't addressed issues, then do please tell us. And David, I think you said we should do this again, and I think we absolutely should do. So we'll have a little think about exactly when the right time to do that is. Again, if you have strong views, please do let us know. But we'll make sure that we put a sort of another version of this in the diary for later on in the year, so we've got another opportunity to update on how things are progressing. So I think I was probably going to leave it there. I can see we've just got one thing in the Q&A around an open forum, and I think certainly making sure that we've got the ability to take and answer questions, I think, is a point well made. So we'll absolutely think about how we can do that for the next one. So thank you for that. I'm going to wrap us up now, I think. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good rest of the day. Thanks. Bye-bye.